Welcome into another edition of The Session with Londa and David. My name is David Austin.
I'm Londa Sherwood Austin. Welcome back.
This is the special 9/11 episode of The Session with Londa and David. And it's really important to me because 9/11 is a big deal to me.
Yeah, same. Very big deal.
Very, very big deal.
Very big deal for all Americans,
yeah.
I think.
And I'll talk about that, but specifically, it's a big deal to us.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary. I was going to save it for the newscast,
Aww.
But yes, today is our 4-year anniversary, and it's been the greatest 4 years of my life.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I think I'm probably going to talk a little bit about that.
I like that. Before we get too far into the show, it's time for news. It's been 22 years since the largest terrorist attack on American soil. September 11th, 2001, galvanized the nation and kind of rallied everyone from all walks of life around a common theme, protecting the ones we love. I don't know anybody who experienced 9/11 either as a viewer or someone who was near one of the attack points who wasn't instantly super patriotic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things came out of that, and I have a note to get more into that too, kind of the spirit of 9/12.
Yeah. Nearly 3,000 people died that day in New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. I was a young news director at the Louisiana Radio Network on that day, and I will truly never forget it. And again, I will never forget because 4 years ago today we got married, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Moving on, the death toll continues to rise in the most lethal earthquake since 1960. The extent of the damage done by the 6.8 magnitude quake late Friday in the High Atlas Mountains is not yet clear. More than 2,700 people in Morocco have already been declared dead, and many adobe-style homes collapsed during that event and subsequent aftershocks. Rescuers from around the globe have converged on the area, and while rescue efforts are kind of a race against time, survivors are still being pulled from the wreckage, and I think that's good news.
Okay, there's how many people have died?
2,700 so far.
And how many people died in the attacks on 9/11?
Almost 3,000. So very similar. 2,500 people have been injured by this earthquake. So I don't know what the injuries were, but they are similar numbers. That is interesting. One of the richest men in the world has a third child with his on-again, off-again girlfriend, Grimes. Elon Musk has announced the birth of Tau Techno Mechanicus. That's the name of the child that was just born. I think he has 5 total, but this is the third one.
9 or 10.
Okay,
he's got a whole big fat gang of them.
This is the third one with Grimes. Tau Techno Mechanicus. He announced that over the weekend, but didn't reveal the child's actual birth date or sex.
Such a weirdo.
Yeah. He's got 2 other kids with her, and their names have symbols in them. I didn't even want to try
Such a weirdo.
to write those down. The football season is now underway in earnest. The Lions edged out the Chiefs in Thursday Night Football to kick off the opening week of play, 21-20. The Browns beat up the Bengals 24-3 on Sunday. The 49ers spanked the Steelers 30-7. The Rams more than doubled the Seahawks, 30-13 in Seattle. And the New Orleans Saints held on to beat the Titans 16-15 in the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans.
Who dat?
As this is not a sports talk program, I don't have time to run through each and every game of the week. But if there's a team you want us to mention, you can write me, David, at SherwoodAustin.com, and I'll get them in the rundown next time. That's what's happening.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Elon Musk is a super weirdo, dude.
Tau Techno Mechanicus.
You know, like, do whatever you want to do, but wow.
I love that name, Tau Techno Mechanicus. It sounds like he's a transformer.
Sounds like a superhero.
And I am guessing he, just from the sound of the name, but I don't know.
It sounds like the child is a transformer. That's how you can say
right.
that.
That's exactly right. They, them is a transformer.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
An interesting thing about 9/11, I was speaking with someone earlier today who was born post 9/11.
Okay.
And said, not having lived through it and just being an observer of history, right?
Sure.
I look at that and think kind of an overreaction on the part of the United States, it feels like.
Uh-huh.
That's what they said to me. It just feels like when you read about it in history, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, I see that it was a terrible thing. Almost 3,000 people died. That's not a huge amount in like the whole context of the history of wars, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I just feel like maybe the United States reaction was really severe given what happened. Now, I didn't get into further conversation, but I can't wait to, because I think having not lived through it, what he's probably missing is the shock of being attacked.
Right.
And, my generation had never experienced anything like that.
Right.
No war, no, you know what I mean? We had Desert Storm, but we were kind of removed from it.
Sure.
And so it was unbelievable.
There hadn't been a premeditated attack on American soil since the 1940s.
Right.
Pearl Harbor.
Right.
And I don't know how many people died in that, but I think about half of who died in September 11th.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought it was an interesting perspective. Again, I didn't get to have further conversation, but we will. And I just thought it was really interesting. What was you were in news, you were the news director.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what was that day like for you?
Well, it was an interesting day already, right? Because none of the nation's governors were in their home states. Maybe one was.
Tell me
there was
more.
a governor's conference going on. And so that day I had on the agenda to speak to the lieutenant governor of Louisiana to find out how things are going with the governor away at the conference and all that.
I don't know if a lot
stuff.
of people know that all the governors of all the states were in one place at one time.
I think Minnesota was the exception because Minnesota was where the conference was. Does that make sense?
Was that by design?
Well, they had a governor's conference. They do that all the time.
Was the attack with the no, not that. The governors being gone, was that part of the design of the attack? That's
well,
what I'm
I don't
asking.
want to add to the legend of that day's attack.
Curious if anybody's ever talked about that.
I've never heard anybody talk about it. And I only know about it because I already had on the agenda to talk to the lieutenant governor about the governor being out of state and if there were any things going on that would be a big deal. What turned out to be a big deal was about 20 minutes after the second plane hit the World Trade Center tower, the second tower, the then lieutenant governor of Louisiana, Kathleen Babineau Blanco, was sworn in because she had to be, we were at war, it seemed.
Right.
So she had to be on alert at the state capitol. So she took over as governor that day. And I got that live because I already had an appointment to talk to her at that time.
What did all the other states do?
I'm sure they did the same kind of thing. If you're in a declaration of emergency, all the airports were shut down, so none of the governors were flying home. None of them.
Well, I hadn't thought about that.
You know what I mean? Everything was messed up. If you look at any of the footage of that day, Louisiana played a pretty big role in 9/11 because the Congressional Aviation Subcommittee Chairman, John Cooksey, made national news for talking about how we need to do racial profiling on the day of 9/11. That was a thing that happened that day. The president flew to Barksdale Air Force Base because he was in Texas, I believe, reading to first graders, maybe Florida, I don't know which, reading to first graders when he got word of the attack. So he had to be in Air Force One, and they wouldn't let him go to the White House. They wouldn't let him go there because there were these planes that are now ballistic missiles, and come to find out one of them hit the Pentagon that day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I think there's so much to the story that unless you've studied it or read a book or, that you don't know.
It
like
was
me, the average person.
It was
I lived
as
through it.
coordinated an attack as Pearl Harbor was, in my opinion.
Crazy.
There were less planes, but they were aggressive in their goals. And the White House would have been hit if it weren't for the people in, what was it, Flight 97?
Right.
Who downed the plane in
Right.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
So it couldn't go to the White House.
Right. That one was heading there.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt? And it might be different than how other people felt because you were in the news
Yeah.
industry, and for you may have just been running on adrenaline.
That's exactly what was happening. I was running on adrenaline. We had all kinds of news happening. You know, we had the lieutenant governor get sworn in live on the air,
Right.
across, all of our radio affiliates. We had John Cooksey making his statements about racial profiling that day and saying things like, I hope those people that did it go to hell and their families burn there too.
I mean,
that kind of
crazy
that
talk,
kind of talk.
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially if you're a decorated fighter pilot and you're seeing American buildings
Sure.
falling because planes purposely slammed into them.
Right.
The very first plane hit, and all of the morning news talk shows went to that.
Right.
So all of America who was watching
Live
morning
footage,
television in real time saw the second plane swoop around
Yeah.
and slam into the second tower.
Yeah.
It was historically gruesome, right? I didn't get an impact or a real emotional feel for it, though, for about 48 hours.
Okay.
Because I was
Working
the stories, working the news. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was exciting because your adrenaline's pumping and you're
Right.
really covering something that may be important. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
I do.
Every
I do.
time you cover a story, you hope it's important.
Right.
But this one felt important when it was happening.
Right.
So you're excited.
Right.
It's just like a presidential assassination. Walter Cronkite covering the JFK assassination. He knew something big was going on.
Right.
And you feel it. Do you feel the loss of life? Do you feel the sadness for the people that died? No, you don't, because you're in a bubble. You're working on the stories, right?
I gotcha.
So when it really hit me was the following Saturday, watching the pictures that school kids drew of the firefighters.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being almost in shock. I mean, just stunned. It was 2000 or 2001?
2001.
2001. So I'm trying to remember, Ada was a baby, right? She's 11 months old.
Right.
So I got 6 little kids at home,
Right.
9 to newborn,
Right.
and that were with me. And I'm really grateful for that, right? Because my kids weren't off to school. They were all there because I was homeschooling all of them at the time.
Sure.
And I remember just being so scared.
Yeah.
And thinking about, I think my mom called me and told me to turn the television on. And just so scared because, some of the local conversation was, are they going to come after Hanford because it's a nuclear reservation, blah, 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 right? So there was a little bit of conversation here in the Tri-Cities,
Sure.
Washington area about, are we a target?
Right.
And so that was pretty scary. But for me, just the idea that we were, I thought, I guess because of when and how I was raised, I thought as Americans, we're impenetrable.
And wars are somewhere else.
Yes.
Wars are in other parts of the world. They're not here.
That's right.
And-
they can't get us.
And that was
they
the
got
thing that
us.
told our generation that we are not
right.
impenetrable, and wars are a thing that can happen.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was so scary,
Yeah.
and I just remember being really scared and in disbelief
Yeah.
that it happened, and I was, kind of glued to the news reports until I realized, like, I've got all these little kids kind of watching this too, and I thought, we've seen it we've seen it enough.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, I think our oldest child, Peter, has the newspapers from that next day.
Yeah.
In his possession, because I kept them for years and years and years. And I think I just gave them to him a couple of years ago. And so, it was so scary thinking, oh, I thought we were bulletproof. And then I find out, oh, we're not bulletproof.
Yeah. I remember I was sitting in a management meeting at the Louisiana Radio Network at that moment after the first plane hit. And I got a phone call on my cell phone, and I never got phone calls from home on my cell phone.
Sure.
And I answered the phone, and I heard, hey, where are you right now? And I said, I'm in a meeting. You need to stop your meeting and go to your newsroom and turn on the TV.
And it was the kid's mom.
Yeah. Yep. And right when I got in there, my friend Jim Angster, who's now the president of the Louisiana Network, had just walked in there, and he and I together were watching the second plane curve around and slam into the building.
Wow.
And he looked at me and said, well, I guess we have to get to work. And we did.
Sounds like Jim.
And we did. We got to work.
Yeah. And what's the takeaway from that? Because I'm always looking for the takeaway, right? And what is something that maybe you carry with you from that day?
That no matter what's happening in your world, you've got to keep going. And in some cases, keep going better than you've ever gone before.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I then went from a guy who was on state and regional radio to a guy who was doing updates nationally. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of thing happens during times like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Crazy.
I think for me, the thing I carried with me from that is, we're not bulletproof, and every day is really a gift.
Every day is a gift. And here's the thing. No matter what's happening in your life or your business, it's not on fire and it's not falling down around you and the people you love.
Well, that's a good perspective too.
Rebar's not crushing you right now. I know it seems hard.
Right.
You know, but you're not having to decide, do I jump because there's no other way to do this, or do I burn alive?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I know that sounds horrible.
No,
and
but it's mortality motivation,
right,
and it's perspective, right? Yeah. It's like, I was talking to a couple of local realtors earlier today that I had coffee with, and they were talking about those moments when it gets hard and you think, do I keep going or do I do something else? And one of them said, I remember that moment, and, very generously and graciously said to me that I'm the reason he kept going. And that's one of my favorite stories ever,
right,
being able, and that's why I love coaching people, because, they come to you kind of feeling a little hopeless and desperate, and you go, wait, this is fixable.
Sure.
This is easier than you think. Let's just do this and this and this. And then, they move forward and make progress, and, I love that. I love that. And the other one said, I've never had that moment. I've never, ever had a moment where I thought, man, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And then she said to me, have you? I said, only one time. And do you know what the one time was?
Mm-mm.
The one time was, so I had to have a hysterectomy to remedy cervical cancer,
right,
in 2021. And it was COVID, so it was all shut down. And what?
Speaking of that, I opted not to put the picture of you going into surgery and us smiling and waving to the camera. I decided not to put that on our anniversary feed today.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you look great, and you'd had propofol, so you were feeling
Let me
pretty
tell
good.
you, I was happy, and it's a good thing I can't buy that at the local store. That's all I'm saying. Nothing make you happier than propofol. Anyway, but coming home I had to go to the hospital to do my pre-op.
Right.
And I had to go by myself because it was COVID and all that.
Yeah.
And driving home, I was crying. I was scared, and I thought to myself, I don't care about anything. I don't care if I ever sell another house again. I just want to live.
Yeah.
You know, and then you live and then you go, well, actually, I really do like doing that. And so I will keep doing that. But it was the only time I ever had a moment that was kind of like that.
That's interesting.
You know, I've never faced a moment where I'm like, God, I don't want to do this anymore. This is terrible. I've never had that kind of moment.
If you won the lottery.
But in the face of death.
If you won the lottery, though, would you want to sell houses?
It's interesting that you say that because one thing that I've been saying to people is I really never have to work another day in my life. And that's the truth because I have X number of dollars in the bank.
Right.
And at the first of next year, I get a big fat settlement.
Right.
That will carry me until the day I die.
Right.
So I kind of am in that position.
Okay.
I don't have to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the option of only doing what I want to do. And so the answer is yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
Because you want to do this.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I think just deep in my DNA is this desire and need and drive and passion to help people get from where they are to where they want to be. And it's why I coach, right? It's why I do a lot of business coaching and life coaching, but it's also why I help people buy and sell real estate and businesses and all, you know, because it is the same thing. We're getting you from where you are to where you want to be.
Right.
So my whole motivation in life is just helping people move forward.
Okay.
What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, helping people to make those steps is something that I love doing and I want to do. And I just want to keep doing it.
Sure.
You know, I thought, well, I want to be a writer full time. I love to write, but as it turns out, given all the time in the world, that's not what I want to do with my time.
Okay. Tell me more about that. Why do you know that? How do you know that?
Because I've had that. I've spent the last 3 years having all the free time I want.
And you didn't
essentially
do a bunch of writing?
Didn't do a bunch of writing.
But how are they related? Because maybe you were busy doing other things.
Nah, I had plenty of time.
But
and I thought about it.
And you never thought today's the day I need to sit down and do it?
Nope.
That's interesting.
I know that day's coming. I know my writing days are coming, right? Where I go back to writing. There's too much that I have to say, right? To not do it again.
Yeah.
But I think it will probably run simultaneously with what I'm doing now.
See, I think that's why I like doing this podcast with you. And I liked our radio venture that we did for a year. Loved it because every day we got to talk about the things that are of import to us.
Right.
And I really enjoy current events. So that's why I like to do a newscast in our podcast. And it's reminiscent of when we were doing the radio show because we were doing headlines 4 times an hour on that program.
Right.
So for me, writing a newscast is fun. And I really love to do it. But I really enjoy talking about the things that are of import to you and to me.
Yeah.
And that's why I do this podcast.
Right.
I don't know if I won the lottery if I do loans. I do know I'd do a program of some sort, but I don't know that I'd keep doing loans.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm also into helping people get from here to here.
Yeah.
And I'm also into helping people have a good experience in their lives. I'm not in love with the technicality of doing loans, and it's a very technical field. You know what I mean? And I think as more AI is employed in the lending industry, I think the need for people that are as good problem solving as I am,
yes, for sure,
will disappear.
No.
Yes, I do. I think that'll
Really?
disappear. I think AI will not solve big problems, but they'll get more people approved quicker and easier without any emotion. I think that's the way this business is ultimately going.
Interesting.
It's not happening in my business because what I do is I solve people's problems.
Right.
But yeah, if I won the lottery, I don't know if it'd be lending for David. It would for sure be broadcasting. It would for sure be podcasting.
Yeah.
It would for sure be business coaching and development. I don't know that it'd be loans.
It's funny you do all of that and
as part
loans.
of doing loans, right?
And loans.
The least
right,
exciting thing about me is that I do loans. And I tell people that when I meet with them.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I build relationships and I help families grow. That's way more exciting than I do loans.
Right. Well, yeah, for sure.
I help families grow by helping them build wealth through the loans that I do
Yeah.
and the consulting that I give them. And I'll keep doing that, but I don't know that I'll keep doing loans. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. You mentioned the news, and it kind of spurs a lot of our conversation. And
Sure.
we hope that it spurs a lot of your conversation at home, and that we get you thinking about things in a little bit different way. And you take some of that with you and ask questions of the people in your life, right? The same way that we ask questions here. Because if we can't get people to think about stuff, then what are we even doing?
Right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And so one thing that I do remember is kind of what I call the spirit of 9/12,
Right.
the day after 9/11.
Yes.
And I loved that. And I think that is also something I carry with me. Like that feeling of togetherness,
Sure.
that feeling of community and care and empathy, and we're all one.
Nothing
Right?
galvanizes a nation like an attack on it.
Right. Yeah,
Does that make sense?
absolutely.
The Ukraine, pretty galvanized right now.
Right.
You know, they've been invaded. They're fighting.
Right.
People are in it.
Yeah. You know, we often want to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
Right. But it's in the conflict sometimes that we do come together. So I don't know that we really need to be afraid of that. And yes, having said that out loud, I realize I am a person who really does try to avoid conflict at all costs. If I can work something out, I will try to work it out, you know.
I got you.
And if it comes to conflict, you don't want to be on the other side of it with me.
Well, no, you definitely are a great negotiator.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be up against you for any reason. I think that's absolutely true.
I'd agree.
And you're a little softer today than you were 4 years ago, by the way.
Yes. We talked about that this morning, actually.
Yeah. I don't know if someone was coming after you for some reason, I don't know how you would handle it, actually, because you have softened a little bit.
I think that, and just to speak to that, when I want to share with our listeners something I shared with you this morning as we were having our morning cup of coffee, saying happy anniversary,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. I said, it's been a beautiful time these last 4 years because you just hold space. And here's what's funny. You don't do it on purpose. You don't even know you're doing it. You hold space for me to just be me.
Yeah.
And what I found out when we got married is I really wasn't certain who that was. So I've spent the last 4 years really discovering more of myself, and it's been a beautiful gift, and I have to thank you for that. And I don't want to change you, and you don't want to change me, and it's marvelous, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I know for sure what I signed up for. I knew what I was getting, and I'm great. I mean, really, truly. But having said that, I think that when someone comes at me, I'm much more diplomatic now.
Okay.
Right? I'm like, hey, listen, I don't know what's going on, but let's work it out.
Yeah.
Instead of necessarily ready to fight.
Right.
Now, it does depend on what the context of it is.
Sure.
Because there are still some things that I bristle real fast and have a really short fuse, even though I'm working on rewiring my brain so those triggers don't trigger quite so fast, right? But I will tell you where I have the hair trigger. And
Okay.
it's if you come after you or my kids.
Right. And I'm that way. If somebody's coming after you, I am very protective. And that's the only way.
But you're protective, but you're not going to fight.
That's not true. That's the only way I'm going to fight is if they're coming after you. You come after me all day long and I'm not
Right.
going to fight.
Right.
I'm going to make a joke and get out of it.
Right.
They come after you, there is going to be a fight. That's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
and you
different.
come after one of our kids and heaven help you because we're both in it.
Right. That's right. Yeah. It's I don't know. I think you and I have both definitely benefited from each other's company over the last 4 years.
For sure.
For me, it's been the greatest adventure I've ever had.
Very nice. Thank you. What is your, what is something that you would share with someone else about a relationship. We'll just use the word marriage because we happen to be married.
Sure.
But your long-term partnership, whatever you want to call it, is fine with us. But for the sake of ease, we'll say marriage. So what do you have any marriage advice, tips that you'd pass on?
What I would tell you is I always believed that relationships were hard work to maintain and have what you were looking for in a relationship, and it took 100% and 100%.
Sure, I always believed that as well.
And that's absolute hogwash.
Right.
If you're in a relationship that by nature lifts you up,
Yeah.
it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah. And I know, listen, some people will roll their eyes. Some people, if you love, you're going to love this. And if you don't, you're
Right.
going to hate it. Man, it's easy.
When you find the person that connects with you through values, through beliefs, through experience, through business,
Yeah.
when someone connects with you on all of the levels that you interact with daily in your life, it is easy to be in a relationship with that
Right.
person. One thing we do is we get into relationships for many different reasons, one of which is convenience. People get into relationships
Sure.
based on convenience. Well, we've been together so long, we might as well bite the bullet and do it.
Right.
That's not a reason to get into a relationship.
sure.
Another reason to get into a relationship may be because I think she's hot AF. I got news for you. Hot AF is awesome. You know what's more awesome? Looking at somebody and thinking, man, they're beautiful when they think they look like straight trash. When you don't see flaws in your partner,
Right.
that's the magic sauce right there. That's the magic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it's easy to love. And prior to our relationship, it's hard to feel loved. It's easy to feel loved now. It's easy for me to give. It's hard to receive. It's easy to receive from you.
I like that.
And that's real.
We've got a few rules in our relationship. There are very few, but here they are. We'll share them with you. Maybe
No third part. No.
maybe it'll help you. One is if it doesn't work for both of us, it doesn't work for either of us.
That's right.
So
And
it's
that's
whatever
easy.
it is.
Right. That's easy.
Another one is we stay in it.
Right.
When we're having a misunderstanding,
Right.
and things start to get a little out of whack, a little flared, we know it's not here.
When I feel
It's
like
probably-
a defense attorney and I've got to stand in front and convince the defendant or the prosecution
right.
to confess because I've got to fight it like Perry Mason,
Right.
I know that's not from you.
Right. So we've recognized that our the majority, if not all, of our triggers, if you
Right.
will, come from past relationships, childhood, all that stuff, right?
Sure. Parental relationships, love
Sure.
relationships,
Sure.
friendships. Yeah.
And so we stay in it. That's rule number 2. We stay in it until we have understanding.
Right.
Well, what does that look like? Well, what it looks like is sometimes we talk for 3 hours
Yeah.
and we keep talking respectfully. There's no shouting. There's no, I won't tolerate it.
That's
I won't
exactly
tolerate
right.
that kind of, it's
That's
one
right.
of my things. Like I will talk as long as we need to talk, but it's going to be respectful conversation,
Sure, yeah.
And so, and there are definitely are times when we've had to put a pin in it, take a beat
And that's
You know?
hard for me, by the way.
and come back to it.
Right.
And, excuse me. One thing that I had to promise you is if I have to step away, I will always come back.
Right.
I will always come back.
Because for me, a trigger of mine is being sent to my room or having to go be by myself. That's
Right.
punishment to me.
Right.
So that's
and
hard.
for me, I've got to have some separation sometimes because I'm so flooded emotionally. I've got to pull back for a minute, take a beat, and get back into, my logic.
Yeah.
And so, number 1, if it doesn't work for both of us, it doesn't work for either of us. Number 2, we stay in it until we understand. And then The only other rule we have is just for David.
Don't wake up Londa.
That's right. If I'm sleeping, do not wake me up.
Because when I wake up at 3:30 in the morning, I just want to sit there excited, raring to go.
If I'm napping, if I'm whatever, well, I don't care what time of day it is. If I'm sleeping, don't wake me up.
Right.
And the reason we have that rule is because I have trouble sleeping. So,
Yeah.
if I'm sleeping, it's because I need it.
There you go.
So there you go. That's our...
And it's easy. When someone genuinely looks at you like you're the greatest thing they've ever seen, it's hard to have a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
I think that's true. And I believe you feel like that's how I look at you.
Yep.
And sometimes I feel like you look at me that way. I'm just kidding. You look at me like that all the time.
Yes.
It's awesome. So, no, it's not hard. What is hard is managing hurt feelings. And some people
it's
get
tough.
into a cycle
Yep.
of hurting one another and don't even remember why.
Right.
Work on that. Maybe get counseling for that.
Right.
That's a thing that can be fixed if you invest in fixing it.
Right.
So what I would say to you is relationships and managing relationships are hard if they're broken. Thankfully, ours isn't broken. It's not hard at all.
Sure.
The hardest thing we do is try to decide who wants what to happen, because Londa will say, hey,
my
do you want me to
gosh.
turn down the air conditioner? And I'll say, well, how do you feel?
That is a problem that we have, is we both defer to one another.
Right.
We're both trying to please one another, and therefore neither one of us can make a fucking decision.
Right. And that's a little goofy. That is goofy. Other than that, there's nothing. It's hard. It's
And
not
I
hard
say
at
to you,
all.
just tell me what to do. And you're like, well, no, I want to do what you want to do. And I'm like, well, I want to do what you want to do. And this is annoying.
And that's when I tell her to mind her place and I hit the back of my hand.
You go ahead and try. You go ahead
Can you
and try.
imagine that? That exists in places.
No.
I don't know who's doing that, but that exists, right?
It shouldn't. Anyway, we should probably wrap this up
Okay.
on a good note before we get into Crazy Town.
Okay. Wrap it up.
You wrap it up. You're the rapper.
What? I'm the gangster rapper.
No.
No, you don't want me to gangster rap?
No.
All right. Is there anything you want to talk about before we say goodbye to the show?
Nope.
We want
That's
to
it.
remind you that we did our big giveaway during
Yep.
our last program, and congratulations to our friend Christy Broussard who
Yep.
won that. She's
Yep.
going to do 4 days and 3 nights in Las Vegas.
Yeah, and look for the next one coming up soon.
Okay, there you go. There you have it. There it is. This has been another edition of The Session with Londa and David. You look like a representative of UL Lafayette today. I love it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you know, the red blazer.
Yeah.
Very fancy.
Well, I wore these shoes today. I just held them up to the camera.
They say love. Peep
Yeah, they
the
say
shoe.
love all over them. They were actually my gift from me to me for my divorce. And I wore them today on my anniversary. So life's weird.
My gift from me to me for my divorce was... I don't have one. I didn't
Okay.
get one. There you go.
We hope you have the best day ever.
We're going to see you again next week. We hope you have an awesome experience this week. And if you need a little motivation, send an email to Londa@SherwoodAustin.com. That's Londa@SherwoodAustin.com. And if you want to tell us what's going on in your world, you can always send an email to me, David@SherwoodAustin.com. That's David@SherwoodAustin.com. Finally, for Londa Joanne Sherwood Austin, I'm David Austin, and this has been The Session.